She walked in quietly, her dress simple, her presence calm. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Among the glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos of the city's most exclusive gala, she didn't quite fit in. Whispers floated across the marble floor. Who let her in? She must be lost. Some even laughed behind perfectly manicured hands. But she kept walking, unaware or maybe just unbothered, until one moment changed everything. A staff member, clearly pressured by a guest, stepped forward. With a forced smile and a firm voice, he asked her to leave. "This event is for invited guests only," he said, glancing at her plain shoes. She looked at him, surprised but not angry. Without a scene, she simply nodded and turned around. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. What no one knew was that the man who funded the entire evening, the one whose name was printed on every invitation, whose fortune helped build half the city, was her husband, and he was about to arrive. This wasn't just about a woman being turned away. It was about assumptions, appearances, and the quiet strength of someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The crowd saw just a simple woman. What they didn't see was the story behind her silence and the storm that was coming. As the luxury cars lined up outside and the cameras flashed, the mood inside the gala was about to shift, because in a few short minutes, the truth would walk through those grand doors, and nothing would ever be the same again. What happens when the masks fall and real power reveals itself in the most unexpected form? Stay with me, because what happens next will leave everyone speechless. Just minutes after she was turned away, a sleek black car pulled up to the gala entrance. Out stepped a man in a tailored suit, calm and commanding. The photographers knew him instantly, Nicholas Hayes, the billionaire businessman known for his low-key lifestyle and generous donations. Everyone scrambled to get a photo. He nodded politely but didn't stop to pose. He looked focused, almost tense, as if something wasn't right. Inside, the music played and glasses clinked, but the tension still lingered. A few guests were still whispering about the stranger who had just been escorted out. Some felt smug, others unsure, but no one had bothered to ask who she was or why she came alone. She hadn't worn designer heels. She didn't carry a name-brand purse. She wasn't on their radar, so they assumed she didn't matter. What they didn't know was that Elena, yes, that was her name, had never liked the spotlight. When she met Nicholas, she was working in a quiet little bookstore. No glam, no cameras, just stories and coffee. And somehow, that was what caught his eye. They fell in love not over dinner parties, but long walks, shared silences, and a deep understanding of life beyond appearances. Even after the marriage, Elena chose to live simply. No social media, no flashing jewelry, no desire to impress. So when Nicholas walked into the gala and scanned the room, he wasn't looking for a celebrity or a business partner. He was looking for her. The one person who made all this, any asterisk of this, mean something, but she was gone. And as the hosts approached him with champagne and wide smiles, their faces began to change, because Nicholas had one quiet question that would shatter their perfect evening. "Where's my wife?" The room seemed to freeze. Laughter died down. The music still played, but no one was really listening. Nicholas's question, soft but firm, cut through the air like glass. "Where's my wife?" he repeated, scanning the faces in front of him. The hosts exchanged glances. Someone stuttered something about a misunderstanding. Another tried to smile it off, suggesting she might have left early. But the truth was sinking in fast, and it wasn't pretty. Word began to spread like wildfire. Staff members were suddenly nervous, remembering the moment she was asked to leave. The security guard who showed her the door now stood frozen by the entrance. And somewhere in the back of the room, one guest whispered to another, "Wait, that asterisk was his wife." The irony was bitter. The woman they had judged, dismissed, and quietly mocked was the reason they were even at the event. Outside, Elena sat quietly in the back of a taxi. She hadn't called her husband. She didn't want to cause a scene or make headlines. That wasn't her style. But as the car rolled through the quiet streets, her mind wandered, not just to what had happened tonight, but to the many moments before, the subtle looks, the hushed tones, the way people treated her differently once they realized who she was. Some became overly polite, others more fake. But tonight hit differently. Tonight wasn't just rudeness, it was rejection, based purely on how she looked. Back at the gala, Nicholas was no longer smiling. The sparkle of the night had dimmed. He wasn't angry, yet, but he was asking questions, to the event organizers, to the staff, to the people who had greeted him so warmly just minutes earlier. And now, the very people who once turned her away were scrambling, because they realized they hadn't just insulted a guest. They'd embarrassed the one person he valued more than anyone. Nicholas wasn't raising his voice, but his silence said more than words ever could. One by one, the hosts and organizers tried to explain what happened, blaming confusion, poor communication, even the guest list system. But none of it mattered. He wasn't interested in excuses. He was interested in accountability. And now, with every second that passed, eyes were on him, waiting, watching, wondering what he would do. Behind the scenes, phones buzzed. Some staff were already whispering about how this might go viral if word got out. A few guests stepped away, pretending not to have seen anything. But others? They were glued to the moment, now regretting their own comments and the way they looked at her earlier. The simple woman they dismissed so easily was the wife of the man who basically wrote the checks for the entire night. Meanwhile, Elena sat at the edge of her hotel bed, still dressed in the same modest gown. Her phone vibrated. It was Nicholas, but she didn't answer right away. Not because she was upset with him, but because she needed a moment to breathe, to feel like herself again. The night had taken something from her. Dignity, maybe, or just a little more faith in how people see each other. Back at the venue, Nicholas turned to the head of the gala. "Tell me exactly who told my wife to leave," he said, his voice still calm, but sharper now. The room had gone still. All the glitter, the designer labels, the surface-level charm. It suddenly felt small under the weight of what was unfolding. And just as one of the hosts opened their mouth to speak, a familiar figure appeared at the far end of the hallway, still, quiet, and watching. Every eye turned toward her. Elena had come back. The moment Elena stepped through the doorway, the air in the gala shifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Some guests looked away, others couldn't stop staring. She stood with quiet strength, her eyes calm but unreadable. She hadn't come back for drama, but she wasn't going to disappear quietly either. And Nicholas? The second he saw her, something in his face softened, but not enough to hide the storm still brewing beneath the surface. She walked slowly, her steps echoing on the polished floor. The same people who had turned their backs on her now shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to greet her or pretend they didn't notice. One woman even whispered she came back, as if this was some kind of scandal. But Elena didn't flinch. She wasn't here for them. Then, just as Nicholas moved to meet her, another voice rang out from behind the crowd, sharp, entitled, and oddly familiar. "Well, if it isn't the guest who didn't belong." The room turned to see a woman standing near the bar, glass in hand, wearing a smirk. It was the gala sponsor's daughter, Victoria Langford, well known in social circles for her influence, but even more for her subtle cruelty. She had been the first to complain about Elena's presence earlier, and now she wasn't done. Nicholas froze, his eyes narrowing. Elena's gaze met Victoria's, calm but unshaken. But before anyone could speak, Victoria added, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Let's not pretend this wasn't a mistake. She doesn't dress the part. She doesn't act the part. And let's be honest, if she wasn't your wife, no one here would care." The crowd gasped. The insult wasn't just bold, it was calculated, the kind of statement that couldn't be taken back. Now, the conflict wasn't just personal, it was public, and it was about to explode. The room stood frozen. Victoria's words hung heavy in the air, like a match dropped into dry leaves. But before anyone else could speak, Nicholas stepped forward, not toward Victoria, but to Elena. He took her hand gently, and without looking at anyone else, he said, "You've always been the only person here who ever mattered." Gasps rippled through the crowd. It wasn't dramatic, it was real. Raw, honest. Nicholas then turned, facing the stunned guests, his voice steady. "This is the woman I built my life with. Not because of how she dresses or how she's seen by the world, but because of who she is. The heart of everything I do." His eyes landed on Victoria, now visibly uneasy. "And you," he added, "just made this night unforgettable for all the wrong reasons." People began shifting, embarrassed. Whispers started again, but this time they weren't about Elena. They were about how quickly masks had fallen. The organizers fumbled to apologize, but Nicholas raised a hand. "It's not me you owe an apology to." Then came the twist. Elena finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "This wasn't the first time something like this happened," she said, scanning the room. "But it's going to be the last." She reached into her small clutch and pulled out a folded envelope. "I wasn't just here as Nicholas's wife tonight. I'm also a silent partner in the foundation that funds this entire gala." The envelope contained documents, proof of her role as co-chair of the foundation. Gasps turned into stunned silence. Even the head of the event stepped back in shock. Elena continued, "Starting tomorrow, this event will be restructured. New leadership, new policies, and most importantly, new values." Victoria was speechless. And in that moment, it was clear Elena hadn't just returned. She had reclaimed everything. The room slowly began to shift from stunned silence to quiet understanding. People lowered their eyes, realizing just how wrong they'd been. The woman they had brushed aside as too plain, too unimportant, had just shown more grace and power than any of them expected. Not through shouting or revenge, but through quiet confidence and truth. Nicholas stood beside Elena, proud, but letting her lead. This wasn't his moment, it was hers. The same woman who had been told she didn't belong now stood at the center of the very world that once excluded her. Not to prove a point, but to change it. Organizers approached her, apologizing sincerely this time. Staff members nodded respectfully, some even looking a little emotional. A few guests approached, ashamed, offering soft words and regretful glances. Elena accepted the apologies, but she didn't gloat. She simply said, "Let this be a reminder that kindness costs nothing, and you never know who you're speaking to." Later that evening, she and Nicholas walked out together, hand in hand, past the same red carpet where she had first been judged. But this time, no one questioned her. No one dared. Cameras flashed, not just for Nicholas, but for her. And for once, she didn't look away. The story of the billionaire's wife who was kicked out of a gala would travel fast. But more than that, it would leave a lasting message about judging by appearances, about quiet strength, and about the difference between status and substance. In a world full of noise and flash, Elena reminded everyone that true power doesn't shout. It stands quietly, waits for the right moment, and then changes everything. And just like that, the night that began with rejection ended in quiet triumph.